I was cleaning my rifle when the knock came on my door. 2 short taps, the kind that aren't a request, but an order. I opened it expecting a routine briefing, maybe another night patrol along the ridgeline. Instead, the captain stood there with a folder tucked under his arm and an expression I'd only seen twice before. Both times, men didn't come home the same. "Gear up," he said. "We've got a situation." He didn't have to say more. In Afghanistan, situation usually meant someone's dying. I followed him to the operations tent, dust swirling around our boots as the rotors of a Black Hawk spun up somewhere behind us. Inside, the lights were dim, radios buzzing softly, maps spread out across the table. The air tasted like stale coffee and tension. A major from another unit waited for us. His face was tight, jaw locked, fingers tapping a pen against the map like each tap kept panic from breaking through. 3 Marines, he said. Recon team. Call signs Wolf 1 through 3. Missing. Missing. That word hits different out here. I leaned closer. Lost contact? Night patrol near the Shadara Valley. They checked in at 0200. No word since. I knew the valley. Steep walls, twisting paths, dead silent except when it wasn't. The kind of place where mountains swallow entire squads without leaving boot prints. Ramirez arrived beside me, still securing the strap on his vest. Enemy territory? The major nodded grimly. Controlled. Heavily. And you want us to go in? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. You're the only team close enough and trained for this terrain, the captain said. Intel drone spotted what might be movement in a ridge cave. Could be them. Could be hostiles. Could be nothing. In other words, we were heading into a black hole where hope went to die. I took a slow breath. When do we launch? The major's eyes hardened. 20 minutes. We didn't speak much as we geared up. In our line of work, silence isn't uncomfortable, it's necessary. It lets the mind settle, narrow, focus. I checked every strap, magazine, clasp, and battery twice. High-altitude missions punish every mistake. Ramirez finally broke the quiet. You think they're alive? I tightened the last buckle on my plate carrier. Doesn't matter what I think. We go. But deep down, I hoped. Harder than I'd admit. We jogged to the flight line where the Black Hawk waited, blades stirring dust into a glowing halo under the lights. The crew chief gave us a thumbs up, and we climbed aboard. The moment the doors shut, the world outside faded into the low, steady thrum of the engines. Headsets crackled alive. 30 minutes to drop zone, the pilot said. The captain looked at us, me, Ramirez, and 2 more from our team. For men heading into mountains that 8 companies whole. This is a rescue mission, he said over the roar. You find them, stabilize them, and call for extraction. You engage only if you have no choice. Speed over firepower. Survival over heroics. Clear. We all nodded. The bird lifted, and the base dropped away beneath us. Lights faded, mountains grew beneath the clouds, and the night swallowed everything. Ramirez elbowed me lightly. Hell of a night for a hike. I snorted. We're not hiking. We're shopping for Marines. Hope they're on the clearance rack. He chuckled once, but worry sat heavy behind it. I stared out the open door at the moonlit ridges below. Afghanistan looked almost peaceful from up here. Almost. The pilot's voice cut in, sharp and unwelcome. Be advised, wind shear increasing. Visibility dropping. You've got 1 shot at this insertion. 1 shot. 1 valley. 3 Marines who might already be dying. I felt the cold of the night wind hit my face and settled into my harness, heart steadying. This was the kind of mission that didn't care about your training or your rank or your reputation. It cared only about what you were willing to sacrifice when the dark finally reached out. We were 10 minutes out when the first warning alarm sounded in the cockpit. And just like that, the longest night of my life truly began. The cockpit alarm wasn't loud, but in a Black Hawk flying low through Afghan mountains at night, even a soft beep feels like a punch to the chest. Wind shear spiking, the pilot announced, voice tense but steady. This storm wasn't on satellite. We're flying blind in pockets. Flying blind in Afghanistan is a polite way of saying one wrong gust and we paint the valley floor. The bird jolted hard to the left. My stomach lagged a half-second behind my body. Ramirez grabbed the overhead strap and yelled over the headset. "Pilot, you good up there?" "Still flying," the pilot replied. "Don't let the bumps scare you." Easy for him to say, he had windows. We had darkness. The crew chief slid the door wider so he could watch the terrain. Wind blasted inside, dust whipping through the cabin, stinging our faces. Below us, the world dipped in and out of sight, jagged peaks, black ravines, cliffs sharp enough to slice a rotor. Another burst of turbulence slammed the helicopter downward. The rotors screamed, the frame shuddered, and for a moment gravity forgot which way it wanted us. I gripped the bench so hard my knuckles ached. "Try not to die before we get there," Ramirez muttered. I smirked, but the truth was, I was thinking the same thing. Then came the captain's voice, low and controlled. "Stay ready. If this storm closes in, you won't get a second pass." We all knew what that meant. Either we get off this bird now, or we go back empty-handed, if we even make it back. The pilot called out. "Approaching drop zone. You've got 60 seconds." The helicopter banked sharply, the mountains rising on both sides like closing jaws. The dust storm thickened, swallowing moonlight, turning the world into a swirling brown fog. The crew chief pointed. "You're dropping onto that ridge." I leaned to see, and my stomach dropped. That ridge was barely more than a spine of rock jutting out over a black void. The wind tore across it hard enough to push a man sideways. One slip, and you'd fall so far they'd need a calendar to time it. Ramirez muttered, "Perfect. Just where I wanted to die." The captain gave the signal. Doors fully open. Wind screaming. Night swallowing everything. Go. 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 I jumped first. Boots hit stone. Gravel skidded. The wind punched me sideways. I dropped to a knee, grabbed onto the jagged rock, and held tight as my body adjusted. Ramirez landed next. Then the others. The helicopter lifted, engine straining as the storm clawed at it. The crew chief gave us a final nod before the bird vanished into the dust like it had never existed. And suddenly it was quiet. Not peaceful. Not safe. Just quiet, the kind that makes you feel like the world is holding its breath. No rotor wash. No radios. Just wind and mountains and the feeling that something unseen was watching. Ramirez crouched beside me. "I hate that sound." "What sound?" "The one where it feels like we're already in trouble." He wasn't wrong. We switched to NVGs and started down the narrow goat trail leading deeper into the valley. The path was barely wide enough for one man, with a drop so steep it made my knees tense just looking at it. The storm above growled like something alive. I checked my GPS, 2 miles to the recon team's last ping. "Terrain?" Ramirez asked. "Bad." "Visibility?" "Worse." He chuckled dryly. "Just like the brochure." We moved slow, steady, rifles up, eyes scanning the darkness. Half an hour in, I stopped abruptly. Ramirez whispered, "What?" I pointed. Across the valley, faint and flickering through the storm, a light blinked once, then twice, then 3 times, the cadence unmistakable. A signal. A distress signal. From someone still alive. Ramirez's voice grew tight. That's Marine code. I nodded, pulse rising. That blink might have been nothing. Or it might have been the only sign of life from 3 men who'd been missing for nearly 12 hours. Either way, the night had just changed. Pick up the pace, I whispered. We moved faster, deeper into the valley, toward the light that shouldn't have been there, and toward whatever else might be waiting beside it. I still remember the way the light hit the mountains that morning, dust floating like gold flakes in the air, the sky too peaceful for what we were driving into. That's the thing about Afghanistan, the worst days always start beautiful. It's almost like the land itself is testing you. We rolled out in 2 mats, our team split but close enough for overlapping fields of fire. I was in the lead truck, behind the gunner's legs, checking and rechecking my kit even though I'd done it 100 times already. Habit. Survival habits don't go away. They stay burned into your bones. Our target was a remote compound tucked into a valley north of Kogyani. Intelligence said a captured aid worker might have been moved there. We didn't know for sure, nobody ever knows for sure, but the information was good enough that Command greenlit the mission. That meant one thing: if there was even a chance a life needed saving, our boots were hitting that dirt. The road we took wasn't really a road. More like a scar carved into the landscape by decades of war and erosion. Our driver, Mitchell, was dodging craters so deep they could have swallowed a motorcycle. Every bounce rattled through the armor and straight into my spine. About 20 minutes into the ride, we passed a small ridge where an old Soviet APC lay half-buried, rusted straight through, like the mountain was slowly eating it. Graves like that were everywhere. Reminders that armies come and go, but Afghanistan waits them out. Bad place for a last stand, our gunner, Reyes, muttered, scanning the ridgelines. Everywhere's a bad place for a last stand, I told him. He smirked, but I caught the tension in his jaw. Reyes was good, fast on the gun, sharp instincts, but even he couldn't pretend this valley felt right. I'd been in Afghanistan long enough to know when the air changes, when the silence starts watching you. That morning, it was watching us hard. About a mile from the projected dismount point, our convoy slowed. Mitchell tapped the brake twice, a signal, not panic, just attention. "What's up?" I asked. He nodded at the ground ahead. Fresh dirt piled on the left side of the track. My stomach tightened. Could have been a landslide. Could have been natural erosion. But it also could have been a pressure plate buried just deep enough to ruin our whole day. I signaled the second truck over the radio. "Hold. I've got suspect soil ahead. We're dismounting to check." The reply was instant. "Copy. Setting 360. We stepped out one by one, rifles high, eyes moving through sectors without thinking. Training takes over fast when your brain starts whispering that this might be it. I crouched near the disturbed patch of dirt, checking for pressure wires, fishing line, anything. But the soil wasn't patterned right. Too wide. Too uneven. Reyes came up beside me. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" "Yeah," I said. "It's a false spot. They do that, bury a decoy to make you walk around it while the real IED waits 10 feet off to the side." So we scanned slow. Real slow. And that's when I saw it, a tiny sliver of metal, barely glinting in the sun, tucked under a rock at the edge of a dried-out bush. Not enough to spot from inside a vehicle. Just enough to kill the first guy who got careless. I motioned for everyone to freeze. My throat went dry. Pressure plate. Right side of the path. Marking. Mitchell exhaled through his teeth. "Hell of a welcome." "Yeah," I said. "Someone knows we're coming." We spent 10 minutes clearing a safe lane around the device and remounting. No one talked. The quiet wasn't fear, it was focus. The kind where every sense sharpens, every muscle listens. Once we were rolling again, slower this time, I couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were tracking us from the mountains. Waiting. Measuring. I've been under surveillance before. You can feel it, like static on your skin. That valley had static all over it. The last mile felt like an hour. Even when the compound finally came into view, a low cluster of mud brick walls surrounded by rocky terraces, I didn't feel relief. Only readiness. Only the rising pulse before contact. As we pulled to a stop, Reyes looked down at me from the turret. You ever think this job gets easier? No, I told him. But we get better at not dying. He laughed once, dry and short. Guess that counts. We stacked, weapons tight, breath steady. Whatever waited behind those walls, we were committed now. And deep down, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This mission wasn't going to unfold the way Intel predicted. And nothing about that compound felt empty. The moment my boots hit the ground outside that compound, I felt it, that strange tightening in the air right before things go bad. It's not fear. Fear comes later. This is something different, something instinctual. Something earned. We formed up along the outer wall, mud brick rough beneath my gloves. The place looked abandoned at first glance, door hanging crooked, windows draped in burlap torn by the wind. But it was too quiet. No goats bleating. No kids running. No distant chatter from the women's side of the village. Just wind scraping over stone. And if you've been in Afghanistan long enough, you know. When there's no village noise, it's because the village knows something you don't. Reyes whispered from the rear, thermal shows nothing. Doesn't mean no one's home, I said. He nodded. He'd learned that the hard way months before. Mitchell stacked behind me, rifle tight. You want door? He asked. No, I said. We take the side breach. Front doors are invitations for ambushes. Side points, corners, weak spots, those are where you live longer. We moved along the wall until I found a part where old mud had cracked, exposing the frame. I pressed my shoulder to it, weight low, breath controlled. 3, 2, 1. I leaned in, and the wall gave faster than I expected, crumbling inward with a muted crunch. Dust exploded into the dim interior. I stepped through first, habit. If someone was gonna take the first bullet, I'd rather it be me than any of my guys. Inside, the room was small and empty except for a rusted cooking pot and a pile of blankets that hadn't been slept on in weeks. But the air wasn't stale like a long-abandoned home. It had been disturbed recently. There was the faint smell of sweat, of smoke, of something metallic. Someone had been here. Maybe still was. We formed a slow, deliberate sweep. Room after room, bare floors, overturned stools, scattered feed sacks, nothing useful. No hostage. No weapons stash. No bodies. But the strangest part? Every door was unlocked. In Afghanistan, that's rare. People lock doors even during the day. They tie ropes around latches. They wedge stones into frames. It's just how life works out there. Unlocked doors mean one thing. Whoever was here left in a hurry. And whoever they were, they knew we were coming. Reyes stepped beside me, shaking dust from his sleeves. Intel screwed us. Intel didn't screw us, I said. Someone fed us scraps. His face tightened. A setup? Maybe. Or maybe they were here, and someone warned them we were on the way. He didn't ask the obvious question, the one that forms like a knot in your gut, who warned them? Because in that war, trust was a luxury no one could afford. Even allies could turn into someone else at the flick of a dollar. I moved toward the doorway that led deeper into the compound. Something on the floor caught my eye. Footprints. Not one or two. Dozens. Boot prints, sandals, bare heels. All heading out the back exit. The dust was still shifting where the wind swept in. Movement was recent, I said. Less than an hour. Mitchell stepped closer. Could be the hostage. Or the people who took him, I replied. We followed the trail out the rear exit, pushing into open sunlight. The valley stretched wide behind the structure, dotted with boulders and thorn bushes. Nothing obvious moved. But the footprints formed a path leading into a narrow cut between two ridges, a natural choke point, the kind insurgents loved using for ambushes. I raised my scope. And then I saw it. Just for a second. A glint. Like sunlight hitting glass. Sniper's scope. Down. I yelled. The first shot cracked a half-second later, snapping past my ear so close it felt like someone flicked a burning match at my face. Mitchell dove behind a rock. Reyes hit the dirt hard, already rotating the turret of his MATV to engage. The second shot hit the wall behind us, spraying mud brick shards like shrapnel. They weren't warning us. They were corralling us. I pressed my back flat, heart pounding but mind steady. This wasn't panic, this was the switch flipping. The part of you that stops being human and becomes pure survival. They knew we'd clear the compound, I said. They waited. Reyes growled, then let's ruin their plan. But before we could reposition, a burst of automatic fire erupted from the ridge, short, controlled, well-patterned. Not amateurs. Whoever these guys were, they were trained. Rounds smacked the ground around us, kicking dust into our faces. The map's armor rang like someone was beating it with hammers. I slid behind a thick slab of stone, checked my mag, and signaled the team. Contact northeast ridge. 2, maybe 3. Possibly more. They want us pinned. Mitchell shouted over the noise, we push back to the trucks. No, I said. They want us to retreat. That valley is a funnel. They'll zero us in. Then what? I peeked again, saw a muzzle flash, ducked. We go toward them. Reyes blinked. Toward the ridge? Are you insane? Probably, I said. But they won't expect it. That's the thing about ambushes, they rely on predictability. They rely on fear. And the fastest way to break an ambush is to run at the men who set it. I took one breath. Then another. Then I sprinted forward. Dust flying, bullets cracking, heart pounding like a war drum. Because if you hesitate in that moment, even for half a second, you die. And that ridge wasn't just hiding enemies. It was hiding the truth about why we were sent here. And who the hell knew we'd be coming? By the time my boots hit the base of the ridge, my lungs were burning from the sprint and the air was thick with dust kicked up by gunfire. But I didn't stop. Couldn't stop. In a firefight, stopping in the open is how you get your name etched onto a memorial wall back home. Reyes and Mitchell were right behind me, fanning out just enough to give us staggered angles of fire. Our second MATV laid down suppressive bursts from the .50, chewing into the rocks above us. The heavy rounds didn't hit the shooters, but they made them flinch. Sometimes that's all you need. The ridge wasn't tall, maybe 20 feet, but it was steep. Loose shale slid under my boots as I climbed, rifle tight to my chest, scanning for targets. Afghan terrain doesn't give you smooth ascents, it gives you unstable footing and jagged rocks waiting to twist your ankle. Every step felt like a gamble. Halfway up, another shot cracked past my head. Close enough that I felt the heat of the round skim my cheek. Contact left rock shelf. I shouted. Mitchell fired back, short bursts. Reyes moved right, trying to flank from a different angle, kicking up dirt as he scrambled. I pressed my back to a larger rock, catching a half-second of breath before peeking over. There, just a shadow and the glint of a rifle barrel. I didn't aim for the shadow. I aimed for the flash. 2 controlled shots. The rifle stopped firing. "Shoot her down," I said. But the job wasn't over. Because as soon as I lifted my head to confirm, another burst ripped from the upper ridge, higher than the first shooters. Different height, different angle. There were more of them. Multiple positions. Reyes yelled. 3, maybe 4. They're tiered. Of course they were. Classic mountain ambush tactic: one group fires low to pin you, the upper group waits to take you from the top. Deadly if you freeze. I didn't freeze. "Push up," I shouted. "They lose angle if we get under them." The closer we got to the top, the fewer angles they had. At a certain distance, their high ground advantage becomes useless. So we climbed. Hard. Grit in our teeth, sweat stinging our eyes, rounds kicking stones off the ridge face as we moved. My shoulders were burning, legs screaming, but adrenaline turned everything into background noise. At the top lip of the slope, I crouched low, counted to 2, then popped up. One shooter, black scarf, dusty vest, was reloading behind a cluster of rocks. I didn't wait. 3 shots. Center mass. He dropped. Mitchell came up behind me, breathing heavy. "You good?" "I'm fine," I said, even though my heart felt like it was trying to punch out of my chest. Reyes slid in on our right, boots scraping. "I've got movement uphill, 2 running north." I turned just in time to see 2 silhouettes sprinting along a narrow goat path that wrapped around the mountain, disappearing behind a bend. They weren't retreating. They were withdrawing in an organized pattern. Which meant they weren't amateurs. Which meant this wasn't random. I raised my rifle, took aim, but they were too far for a clean shot. I lowered it, exhaling hard. Mitchell spat dust. "You think they were escorting the hostage?" "I think they knew exactly where we'd be and when," I said. "And they wanted to buy time." Reyes kicked at the dirt. Buy time for who? That was the question. Because we hadn't seen any sign of the hostage. No personal items. No struggle. No tracks of a bound person being dragged. Nothing. Just fighters who were too prepared and too coordinated for a small valley ambush. I looked down into the valley, the empty compound, the 2 maps idling below, the swirling dust settling over the ground where bullets had just kicked up hell. And the realization hit me with an uncomfortable weight. This wasn't where they kept the hostage. This was where they tested us. Where they watched us respond. Where they measured our strength, our timing, our gear, our angles. This wasn't the target. This was reconnaissance. And we walked right into their data collection. Mitchell cursed under his breath. "So what now?" "We track the runners," I said. "They'll lead us to whoever's really behind this." Reyes adjusted his sling. "You think we can catch them?" "No," I said. "Not today." He looked confused. "Then why track them?" "Because they're not ghosts," I replied. "And men who run like that leave trails, even in rock." I scanned the mountain path, the curving lines in the dust, the tiny displaced stones, the impressions of hurried feet. They were faint, but real. Then I looked farther north. A narrow pass. A route into deeper territory. Unfriendly territory. And maybe, buried somewhere up there, the truth about the missing aid worker. Or the truth about whoever wanted us chasing the wrong lead. I stood, slung my rifle, and breathed in the dry mountain air. "All right," I said. "Let's find out where this trail goes." Because if they thought we'd turn around. They didn't know us very well. We moved fast. Faster than you're supposed to on that kind of terrain. Mountain paths in Afghanistan aren't really paths, they're scars in the dirt left by goats and men who don't fear death. One wrong step and you're tumbling 100 feet down a cliffside. But we weren't thinking about falling. We were thinking about the two runners and who they might be leading us to. The trail climbed in jerks and angles, like it was designed by someone who hated straight lines. Every 20 steps I'd crouch and check the ground, a fresh footprint here, a disturbed rock there. They were moving fast too, but panic makes men heavy-footed. You can always track panic. Mitchell's breathing was ragged behind me. "Boss, how far you think they're going?" "As far as they need to," I said. Men don't run toward the mountains unless they have somewhere safe to hide. Reyes exhaled sharply. "Or someone waiting." "Yeah. That part too." The pass ahead funneled into a narrow throat between two cliffs. Natural choke point. The kind of place where even a kid with a homemade rifle could hold off a squad if he was determined enough. I signaled the team to slow. We stayed low, hugging the wall, boots stepping in the same place as the enemy had stepped. The rock still held a faint warmth, meaning the runners had passed minutes ago. Then the wind died. When wind stops like that in the Afghan mountains, it feels like the world is holding its breath. Mitchell whispered, "Something's off." "No birds," Reyes added. "No goats. No distant shouting. Just silence." I scanned the slopes for glints, shadows, movement, anything out of place. The sun hung low, painting the rocks in that burnt gold glow it gets right before things turn dangerous. My hand tightened on my rifle. We reached a bend in the pass. Beyond it was a hollow, a shallow bowl carved out by years of rain and wind. Good ambush terrain. I raised a fist to halt the team. We knelt. Listened. Nothing. Then, faint, almost lost in the air. A metallic tink. Like someone bumping a piece of gear against stone. Reyes pointed. "Left ridge." I nodded. We angled wide, staying in the shadow line. When we crested a low rise, I finally saw it. A small fire pit. Fresh. Still warm. 3 impressions in the dust where men had been kneeling. They'd stopped here. Paused. Maybe waited for someone. But that wasn't the part that made the hair rise on my neck. On the ground beside the fire, half buried under a rock, was a torn piece of cloth. American. Tan fabric. Same shade as our uniforms. Reyes swallowed. "One of ours?" "Could be," I said. I picked it up. It was stiff with dried sweat and dust. A sleeve torn clean at the seam, not cut, not frayed. Yanked. Hard. Mitchell frowned. "Could be the hostage?" "No," I said quietly. The aid worker would have been wearing civilian clothes. This. I held the fabric close, rubbed it between my fingers. This belonged to a soldier. Reyes whispered, "But we don't have any missing in this sector." "That's what command thinks," I said. The 3 of us stared at each other for a moment. The mountains pressed in on all sides, cold and quiet. I felt a heaviness in my chest, something that had been building since our intel first brought us here. "We're not just tracking insurgents," I said. "We're tracking someone who fought back." Mitchell's jaw tightened. "If they took one of ours." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Because in our world, it wasn't just about saving a life. It wasn't just about completing a mission. If an American soldier was out there, alone, dragged across enemy terrain, we weren't leaving until we brought him home or brought hell down trying. I stood, slinging my rifle, eyes fixed on the North Pass where the runners had disappeared. "Gear up," I said. "We follow the trail." Reyes raised a brow. "All the way?" "To the end," I said. Even if the end was buried deep in hostile territory. Even if the end was a trap. Even if the end was worse than anything we wanted to imagine. Because the truth was simple. Out here, in these mountains, the enemy had home field advantage. But we had something they didn't. We had a reason. A brother was missing. And no American gets left behind. We moved deeper into the pass, shadows stretching long across the ground as the sun dipped behind the peaks. There's a moment in the Afghan mountains, right before night hits, where everything turns cold and hostile. Colors drain. The wind sharpens. And you feel like the world is reminding you that you don't belong here. That's where we were, stepping into that kind of dusk, following the faint footprints of two men who tried to kill us only minutes earlier. But now we weren't thinking about them. Now we were thinking about the soldier who left behind that torn sleeve. Reyes moved to my left, scanning the ridgeline. Mitchell covered our rear. We'd gone silent, the kind of silence where no one wastes breath on theories or jokes or false comfort. Then the terrain changed. The narrow pass widened into a long slope of loose shale. Every step sent tiny avalanches sliding downhill. The footprints here were clearer, deep impressions, hurried strides. They were running hard, Mitchell whispered. We're close, I said. To what? That part one didn't voice. Halfway across the slope, the wind carried something faint but unmistakable. Gunpowder. Old, not fresh. But recent enough to still cling to the air. Reyes sniffed. Someone fired rounds here. Not long ago, I said. We moved faster, up the slope, until the ground leveled out on a small plateau. And that's where we saw it. Shell casings. A lot of them. Brass glinting in the dying sunlight, scattered in an uneven arc across the ground. I crouched and picked one up, still warm at the base, the heat buried beneath a layer of cooling dust. .556, I said. Not Afghan surplus. Ours. Reyes knelt and traced a line in the dirt. He fought here, whoever he was. I nodded. The casings painted a picture, short, controlled bursts at multiple angles. Someone had defended themselves against multiple attackers, falling back step by step. A fighting retreat. A desperate one. Then Mitchell called out, voice low and tight, "Boss, over here." We moved to where he stood at the edge of the plateau. And my stomach sank. There, carved into the dirt, was a long smear of dragged boot prints. Not walking. Not running. Dragging. One set of American boot prints. Deep and staggered. Two other sets, wider, heavier, pulling him. Reyes shook his head. He was injured. Yeah, I said. And he didn't go quietly, Mitchell added. That part was obvious. The ground was torn with scuffle marks. A broken rifle lay in the dust, American-issue M4 snapped clean across the handguard, like someone had struck it against a rock during a last stand. I picked it up. It wasn't just broken. It was blood-stained. I felt something twist in my chest, not fear, not anger, but a cold clarity. The kind you only get when the mission stops being a mission and becomes personal. Reyes looked north, voice quiet. They took him alive. Mitchell added, or alive enough to move. We stood there for a moment, the plateau silent, the air heavy. Then Reyes pointed at something farther ahead. Is that? We walked toward it. A torn strip of desert tan fabric, same color as the sleeve we found earlier. And next to it, a single dog tag half buried under a rock. I brushed off the dirt. The name was scratched, worn, barely legible. But it was American. No doubt. Mitchell exhaled. That's it. That's our confirmation. Yeah. It was. The missing aid worker wasn't the only one taken. Someone in Washington had left out a pretty big detail. We weren't just on a recovery mission. We were on a rescue mission. I slipped the tag into my vest pocket. It felt heavier than metal. Reyes straightened his sling. What now? I stared into the narrowing canyon where the drag marks led, dark, silent, waiting. Now we keep going, I said. Until we find him. Reyes adjusted his gear. And if he's alive? We bring him home, I said. And if he's not? Mitchell asked. I chambered around, the sound echoing across the stone. Then we bring justice. The wind picked up, carrying with it the faintest sound. A voice? A shout? A cry? We froze. There it was again. Far. Muffled. But human. Mitchell whispered, "Boss, you hear that?" Yeah. I heard it. And whoever was making that sound was still alive. The sound was faint, too faint to make out words, but raw enough to spike adrenaline through my veins. A human voice, buried somewhere inside that twisting canyon ahead. Someone in pain. Someone calling out even though they knew the mountains would eat the sound. Reyes shifted beside me. Direction? North-northeast, I whispered. About 200 meters. Mitchell shook his head. Could be a trap. It could, I said. Or it could be the reason we're here. The canyon narrowed to a slit barely wide enough for two men to stand shoulder to shoulder. Jagged walls on both sides rose like broken teeth, casting everything in deep shadow. The kind of terrain where ambushes weren't just possible, they were expected. I signaled hand over hand for slow movement. We entered the canyon, rifles up, every footfall measured. The air grew colder, heavier. The rocks amplified the smallest sounds, a boot scuff became a gunshot, a breath became a whispering echo. Halfway in, Reyes muttered under his breath, "Feels like walking into a throat." Yeah. And we were headed straight toward the stomach. We kept moving. 20 meters. 30. 50. Then, another cry, louder this time. Sharp. Ragged. I lifted a fist, stopping the team. Reyes, take high ground on the right wall. Mitchell, left side. They nodded, climbing with practiced ease, digging boots and fingers into cracks. I stayed low, slowly moving forward, rifle tight against my cheek. The canyon bent sharply left. Whatever was making that sound was right around the corner. I breathed once, slow. 3. 2. I swung out, rifle aimed. And found no fighters. No ambush. No rifles. Just a small hollow in the rock, and a man lying against the wall. American uniform. Dust-caked. Blood dried from his temple down to his jaw. Hands zip-tied in front of him. One leg twisted at a wrong angle. He blinked when he saw me, like he was trying to confirm I wasn't a hallucination. "Jesus, you're real," he whispered. I dropped to one knee beside him. "Easy, brother. We've got you." Reyes and Mitchell slid down from the walls, landing beside us. Mitchell cut the zip ties. Reyes checked his pulse. "Name?" I asked. He swallowed hard. "Staff Sergeant Daniel Morris. 5th Group." Reyes and I locked eyes. 5th Group was nowhere near our AO. "What the hell are you doing out here?" Mitchell asked. Morris coughed, pain stabbing through it. "Compromise, team split, they took our comms, dragged me, trying to get me across the ridge." "Where's the rest of your team?" I asked. His eyes filled with something between guilt and desperation. "Dead," he said softly. "All but me." "Hostage?" I asked. "Aid worker?" He nodded weakly. They're keeping her alive, but not here. Where? Reyes asked. Morris pointed deeper into the canyon. Safe house, 4 clicks north, hidden in the old mines. Old mines. Great. Morris's breathing hitched, not panic, not fear. Pain. Did they do this to you? I asked, pointing at his leg. No, he whispered. Broke it when I tried to escape. They beat me after, but they wanted me alive. They were asking about your unit. That stopped me cold. Mitchell frowned. Asking, what exactly? Morris's voice trembled. Your names. Your routes. Your patterns. They had files. Photos. Satellite shots. They knew you were coming. Reyes cursed under his breath. I clenched my jaw until it hurt. Someone had fed them intel. Someone inside the system. Can you walk? I asked. Morris laughed, a bitter, broken sound. Not unless you're carrying me. I slung his arm over my shoulder. Then that's what we do. Mitchell adjusted his pack. And the runners? They're headed to the mines, I said. And we're not letting them get there first. Reyes moved up to scout the next turn in the canyon, but froze almost immediately. Boss, he whispered. I lowered Morris gently against the wall and moved to Reyes's side. Up ahead, at the mouth of the canyon. Tracks. Fresh ones. Multiple. Boots. Sandals. Heavy prints. Light ones. All grouped. Then something else. A blood trail. Not old. Shiny. Still wet. My fingers tightened around my rifle. Mitchell stepped up behind us. They're close. Closer than we thought, I said. Reyes nodded, jaw set. They're moving the hostage. Maybe, I said quietly. Or maybe. Mitchell swallowed. Maybe they know we found Morris. I looked at the ridge line above the canyon mouth. A silhouette. Just one. Watching us. Then it disappeared. Lay him down. I snapped. Form perimeter. Reyes lifted his rifle. Mitchell took the opposite wall. I pulled Morris behind cover. Boss? Reyes asked. We're not alone, I said. And then, from somewhere beyond the canyon. A single rifle shot. Not aimed at us. A signal. And the mountains answered with silence that felt like the inhale before a storm. This wasn't over. Not even close. They knew we were coming. And now they knew we weren't stopping. The shot echoed through the canyon, rolling off the cliffs like distant thunder. It wasn't aimed at us, that much I knew immediately. The crack was sharp, purposeful. A call-out. A warning. Or worse, a signal. Reyes scanned upward fast. I don't have eyes on him. Mitchell steadied his rifle on the canyon wall. He was signaling. That's a spotter move. Yeah. And spotters never travel alone. I got Morris propped against a boulder, his face pale but conscious. You good? I asked. He nodded weakly. For now. I turned back to the canyon mouth. The sunlight outside was fading fast, leaving long shadows stretching like claw marks across the sand. The air carried that cold edge, like the mountains themselves were waiting to see who survived the next few minutes. Reyes crouched beside me, whispering, Boss, this feels wrong. I know, I said. They're setting something. Mitchell pointed at the ridge above the canyon. I still can't believe they were watching us. They knew exactly when we'd reach Morris. Which means, I said, they know exactly which route we have left to take. Reyes exhaled sharply. A channelized choke point. A killing ground, I corrected. Silence fell again, thick, heavy, pressing on the eardrums. Then Morris whispered, barely audible, "They're not trying to kill you yet." That stopped all of us cold. Mitchell knelt beside him. "Then what the hell are they doing?" Morris swallowed, voice trembling. "They want you alive, at least for a while. They want to interrogate your team the way they did mine." I felt a chill crawl straight down my spine. He wasn't wrong. The ambushes, the staged silence in the village, the coordinated shots, the runners, the canyon signals, this wasn't chaos. This was choreography. Someone was pushing us exactly where they wanted us. But they made one mistake. They thought we scared easy. I looked up at the ridge again. No movement. Just empty rock. "All right," I whispered. "We're not playing their game anymore." Reyes nodded. "So we break the script?" "Yeah," I said. "Hard." I pointed to a narrow cut in the canyon wall, barely visible unless you knew what you were looking for. A shadow seam. A natural fracture in the rock. "We take that route," I said. "They'll expect us to go north toward the mines, but this crack puts us above them." Mitchell raised a brow. "Boss, that's a near vertical climb." "That's why they won't expect it," I said. Reyes smirked despite the tension. "Going off the books again?" "Always," I said. We got Morris stabilized with a sling harness Reyes improvised from rope and fabric. It wasn't pretty, but it would hold. He gritted his teeth as we lifted him. "You're insane," he muttered. "We get that a lot," I told him. Then we climbed. Hand over hand. Boots scraping. Fingers digging. The rock tearing skin. The air thinning. Every few feet, stones slipped out under us and tumbled into the canyon below. Halfway up, Mitchell whispered, "Boss, think the spotter on the ridge is tracking us?" "No," I said. "He's waiting for us to walk into whatever they staged." "And when we don't?" I pulled myself onto a narrow ledge and offered him a hand. "Then they rewrite their plan." We reached the top just as twilight sank fully behind the mountains. The world turned blue-gray, outlines sharp, shadows long and jagged. From up here, we had a view into the northern basin, a deep cut of terrain leading toward the mines. And that's when we saw them. Dozens of men. Moving in formation. Spreading out. Setting positions. Carrying gear. Weapons. And in the center. Two figures being pushed forward at gunpoint. Even from this distance, I knew the gait of the first one. The hostage. The missing aid worker. But the second figure. He walked differently. Painfully. Limping. Shoulders slumped but fighting to stay upright. And then, through the fading light, I saw the uniform. American. My heart clenched. Reyes whispered, "Another one?" "No," I said quietly. "Not another." Mitchell leaned forward. "Boss, you know him?" My throat tightened. "Yeah," I said. "I do. Because I recognized the man being forced across the rocks. A soldier we thought had rotated home months ago. A man we all trusted with our lives. A man who should have never been here. And yet, there he was. Dragged like a pawn in a game none of us understood." Mitchell's voice was barely audible. "What the hell is happening?" I exhaled slowly, every part of me turning cold steel. "They didn't just ambush us," I said. "They infiltrated us." The wind blew over the ridge, carrying the faintest sound of the enemy below preparing for something bigger. Something planned. Something final. And the sight of my former teammate, alive but captured, carved the truth into my gut. This wasn't a rescue mission anymore. This was a reckoning. For a long moment, none of us spoke. The wind cut across the top of that ridge, cold and sharp enough to sting the skin, but not nearly as sharp as what I felt in my chest. Below us, my teammate, a man I'd shared chow with, bled beside, trusted without question, was being pushed like a bargaining chip. Hands bound, face cut, uniform torn. And him being here meant one thing. We'd been compromised long before we stepped foot in this valley. Reyes knelt beside me, eyes fixed on the enemy formation. "Boss, we going after him?" I didn't answer right away. The canyon below was lighting up, not with gunfire, but with movement. Men taking positions. Tripods. Spotters. Communication runners. This wasn't a camp. This was the staging area for a major strike. Mitchell swallowed hard. That's too many. If we go down there guns hot, we don't walk back out. I finally spoke. We're not going down head-on. Reyes shook his head. Then how? We take out their command spine, I said. The guy on the ridge who signaled earlier? He wasn't scouting us. He was keeping eyes on the hostage transfer. He's coordinating. I pointed across to a smaller rise on the opposite side of the basin, a rock shelf perfectly positioned above the enemy. A vantage point. A kill zone, but in our favor this time. Mitchell tracked the angle. 2 shooters could light up their command cell from there. 3, I said. I'm still shooting. Reyes raised a brow. And Morris? I looked at the wounded soldier strapped across a flat stretch of rock, cheeks pale but eyes still burning with stubborn life. He stays here, I said. Out of sight. He'll be safe. We'll come back for him. Morris didn't protest. He just closed his eyes and whispered, "Finish it." So we moved. Crawling across the ridge. Slow. Controlled. Every rock a potential silhouette. Every sound a potential giveaway. The sky darkened fully until the mountains became jagged shapes against a starlit haze. The air got colder. Quieter. The kind of quiet where you could hear your own pulse in your ears. When we reached the opposing ridge, the enemy basin lay wide beneath us, closer now, shapes clear, faces visible. Their commander stood near a cluster of crates talking into a radio. Men surrounded the hostages, keeping them close. Mitchell steadied his rifle. "Call it, boss." Reyes loaded a fresh magazine without a sound. "Just give the word." I scanned the enemy ranks one last time. The tension in the air was electric, like the moment before a storm breaks. My teammate, the captured soldier, looked up suddenly, eyes scanning the cliffs. And for just a second, his gaze locked onto ours. He didn't smile. Didn't panic. Didn't show fear. He just gave a tiny nod. I exhaled. "Send it." 3 rifles fired at once. The commander dropped first, clean through the temple. His radio bearer went down next. Then the spotter. Chaos erupted instantly. Men shouting, scattering. Some firing blindly at the cliffs. Others grabbing the hostages. Tracers cut through the dark like molten streaks. Reyes shifted target to target. They're scrambling. Mitchell kept a steady cadence. Left flank running, got them. I scanned for the hostage guards. Reyes, center mass, near the crates. On it. He folded 2 of them before they hit the ground. The third panicked and grabbed the captured American by the collar, shoving a pistol to his head. I stopped breathing. "Boss." Reyes hissed. "He's using him as cover." Below, the hostage-taker screamed something in Dari, waving the pistol erratically. Mitchell whispered, "You don't have a shot." "Yeah," I said quietly. "I do." I lowered my breathing. Found the rhythm. Found the stillness between my own heartbeats. Trained my scope on the tiny sliver of exposed jaw behind the American's shoulder. The man jerked him again, yelling. I waited. The American suddenly leaned just half an inch left, enough of an opening. I fired. The hostage-taker's head snapped back, and the American dropped to his knees, hands still bound but alive. Reyes let out a breath he'd probably been holding the whole time. Nice shot. Go, I said. We're retrieving them. We descended fast, bounding from rock to rock, sweeping the remaining enemies who hadn't retreated or bled out. The fight was over by the time our boots hit the basin floor. The first hostage, the aid worker, sobbed when we cut him free. The soldier, he looked at me long and hard. Thought you rotated, I said. So did I, he answered, voice raw. They grabbed me off convoy. Replaced me with someone friendly to their cause. Someone who fed them every detail of your movement. Reyes cursed under his breath. Mitchell shook his head. They were inside the system. Deep inside, the soldier said. This wasn't just Taliban. This was coordinated by foreign handlers. Bigger players. I didn't respond. Not then. Some truths aren't meant to be spoken on a battlefield. We got them both to the ridge, retrieved Morris, and signaled for exfil at dawn. A hello from the nearest FOB thundered in just as the first light hit the valley, the blades kicking up sand and dust like the earth itself exhaled relief. When we lifted off, I looked down at the basin, at the footprints, the spent brass, the shadows where men had lived and died just hours ago. And I felt that familiar weight settle in my chest. People back home always ask what bravery looks like. They think it's medals. Or speeches. Or some heroic moment made for stories. But bravery is quieter. It's Reyes cracking jokes while bleeding from a graze wound. It's Mitchell keeping a steady scope while the world falls apart. It's Morris telling us to leave him behind even when he's terrified. It's a captured teammate giving one tiny nod in the dark, trusting you to take a shot that could have ended him. Bravery is doing the right damn thing even when everything in you is scared stiff. That valley took a piece of all of us. But it also reminded me why I served, why I'd do it again if I had to. Not for glory. Not for medals. But for the men beside me. And for the ones we bring home. Every single one.